What's the biggest no you in history? Stop sending assassins to kill me. We already captured 5 of them. One of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you send another one, I'll send one to Moscow and I won't have to send another one. Josip Broz Tito to probably the most powerful and influencing person back then. What's even better is the fact that he outlived Stalin by 30 years and there's a theory that he was involved in his death. Great series on Titoism by the Dead Ideas podcast, including some interviews with people who lived under his regime. I highly recommend checking it out. When someone tried to assassinate Andrew Jackson, both of the assassins' guns jammed. Andrew Jackson then started to beat him with a cane and had to be restrained from killing him. Another by Jackson. In a duel, he allowed the other man to shoot first, got hit, then took his sweet time aiming and killing the other man. I'm probably getting some of the details wrong, but when the assassins, the real order, not the video game order based on them, tried to kill one of the Mongol Khans, the Mongols turned around and wiped out their entire order. Can't remember the exact words, correct me if I'm wrong, but it goes something like this. The English capture and French boat. Englishmen, you Frenchmen fight for money while we English fight for honor and courage. Robert Surcouf. Frenchman, well, we all fight for what lack the most. History is hard. E2, history is really hard. Can't tell who said what : murder suicide by words. When France demanded that all US soldiers get off of French soil, and LBJ asked, does that include the ones buried at Normandy? When Harry Houdini, the magician Houdini, quietly and easily debunked America's most famous spiritualist psychic, Mina Marjorie Crandon, the nation went nuts. Houdini lost his mom a while back and was crazy desperate for answers or reassurance, and when he realized psychics were a farce, he became hellbent on exposing their malpractices. Marjorie was so good at fooling people that even the men working with Houdini to debunk her were certain she was the real deal. So, Scientific American had a prize of $2,500 in the 20s. That is a lot of cash for real proof of otherworldly contact, and the committee was totally divided as to whether or not they should fork it over to her. This pissed Houdini off. He sat in 2 seances and each time was able to predict what and when Marjorie would move her head and feet to move things around the seance table. He figured out her every trick and was ready to expose her, but the SAR committee refused to let him inform the public at large. Finally, he convinced them to let him release a pamphlet, and he started replicating her shows perfectly, much to the amusement of Marjorie's former believers. Enraged at Houdini for trying to expose her as a fraud, Marjorie was still able to keep her practice alive, pun intended, despite Houdini's duplicates, and her supporters fervently wished Houdini dead. Marjorie finally channeled the spirit of her dead brother in August of 1926 to confidently claim Houdini will be gone by Halloween of the same year. Harry Houdini died on the 31st of October, 1926 due to septic infection from a burst appendix. Marjorie totally coincidentally predicted his death, which, in my opinion, is deadest the greatest no you of all time. So she paid off the guy who ruptured his appendix. Not the biggest, but my favorite. Julius Caesar captured by pirates. Pirates obviously have no idea who they got there. Julius Caesar ridiculing them, bossing them around, all out not giving a frick, until they release him after receiving the ransom, which Julius dictated them. He thought their first demand was too low, which is the point he cracks his knuckles, gathers his men and goes after the pirates to crucify them, which he did. Oh, and which he had announced to them in advance when they captured him. However, a much bigger no-you was probably when the Khwarezmid Empire captured and ultimately killed 500 emissaries from the Mongols. Unfortunately, that was at the time when their boss was a guy named Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan didn't like his emissaries being killed, so he went to war with the Khwarezmids, and he didn't stop before he had razed their cities and killed or enslaved each and every one of them. It was in one of those cities, Bukhara, where he had the people assemble in the main mosque of the town to declare that he was the scourge of God, sent to punish them for their sins. I'd say that counts as an OU. Oh, and then came the complete destruction of the city of Gurjang, south of the Aral Sea. Upon its surrender, the Mongols broke the dams and flooded the city, then proceeded to execute the survivors, except for young women and children. Those were enslaved. Urgench is to this date considered one of the bloodiest massacres in human history. World War II and the Battle of the Bulge. The German High Command threw thousands of tanks and troops into what was perceived to be the weak point in the Allied lines. Deep in the Ardennes region of northeastern France, the Germans completely surrounded the US forces in Bastogne and laid siege to the town. It was one of the coldest winters on record, and bad weather prevented Allied air support or air resupply. On deck. 22. 3 days before Christmas, the Germans sent a party of 4, a major, a captain and 2 enlisted men, up the road to Bastogne carrying a large white flag, bringing a demand from the Nazi commander for the Allied troops to surrender. They were met on the road by US troops, were blindfolded, and taken to one of the US command posts. The acting US commander, General Anthony McAuliffe, replied to the demand with just one word: nuts. We're paratroopers. We're supposed to be surrounded. Not super historical as the others, but my favorite. In the early 1960s, Ferrari dominated the 24 hours of Le Mans. However, they were not in a good financial situation, so Henry Ford II offered to buy the company and allow them to do their own thing. Eventually a deal was worked out, but at the contract signing something off Enzo, and he said he didn't want the deal. Henry was p. Henry then decided that Ford will be the dominate force in the 24. After a year or so of R&D, Ford came out with the GT40. The next 3 years Ford took the top 3 spots and dethroned Ferrari. The contract was all drawn up and Ford was about to sign it, but with one last reading it was discovered that Ferrari wouldn't sell their motorsports division, the one thing Ford wanted. That then led to what you described. World War I, when the Germans called for America to stop using the Model 1897 trench gun, then said they'd execute any Americans found with the M97 or shells for it. Then General Pershing US had said to execute any Germans with a flamethrower or a saw blade bayonet. If I'm right, there's no documented cases of anyone being executed due to this though. Taken from Drunk History. Before Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel, Hamilton wrote a letter saying that he was a good Christian and he never intended to kill Burr in a duel. Hamilton was going to waste his shot and fire in the air, which he did. So if Burr actually killed him, Burr is the butthole. Guess who history remembers as the butthole? Aaron Burr, sir. Olga of Kiev. Homegirl ruled the city-state of Kiev in the 900s with her husband Igor. They were at war with the shitheads next door, the Drevlians. They managed to kill Igor, leaving Kiev without a leader. The Drevlians sent a group of diplomats offering peace if Olga married the Drevlian prince, essentially merging the two kingdoms. Olga had them buried alive. Then she sent a message back to Drevlia that said, "Oh yes, I'd love to marry your prince. Please send a delegation of your highest and most powerful nobles to escort me to the wedding." She had a special bathhouse sauna hotel built for them so they could rest up before taking the long journey back to Drevlia. Olga locked them inside and burned the whole thing down. Now that Drevlia's entire government was either buried alive or immolated, they were pretty much fair game. Olga laid siege to Drevlia and demanded they surrender. Her only demand was that each household give her a life sparrow from their roof thatching. The Drevlians were like, well that's odd, but it's not like we have a choice, so okay. Olga then had her troops tie a burning piece of sulfur to each sparrow's leg and let them go. Naturally they flew back to their nests, in the roofs of every house in Drevlia. The entire city caught on fire at once and Olga had her troops murder anyone who fled. She's a Catholic son. BTW. The older saints were a little more aggressive. Bob Marley being shot, then performing a free concert 2 days later, stating the people who are trying to make this world worse are taking a day off. How can I? Sultan Mehmed IV to the Zaporozhian Cossacks. As the Sultan, son of Muhammad, brother of the sun and moon, grandson and viceroy of God, ruler of the kingdoms of Macedonia, Babylon, Jerusalem, Upper and Lower Egypt, emperor of emperors, sovereign of sovereigns, extraordinary knight, never defeated, steadfast guardian of the tomb of Jesus Christ, trustee chosen by God himself, the hope and comfort of Muslims, confounder and great defender of Christians, I command you, the Zaporozhian Cossacks, to submit to me voluntarily and without any resistance, and to desist from troubling me with your attacks. Turkish Sultan Mehmed IV. The response. Zaporozhian Cossacks to the Turkish Sultan. O Sultan, Turkish devil and damned devil's kith and kin, secretary to Lucifer himself. What the devil kind of knight art thou, that canst not slay a hedgehog with your naked ass? The devil shoots, and your army eats. Thou shalt not, thou son of a W, make subjects of Christian sons. We have no fear of your army. By land and by sea we will battle with thee. Frick thy mother, thou Babylonian scullion, Macedonian wheelwright, brewer of Jerusalem, goat-sucker of Alexandria, swineherd of Greater and Lesser Egypt, pig of Armenia, Podolian thief, catamite of Tartary, hangman of Kamiamets, and fool of all the world and underworld, an idiot before God, grandson of the serpent, and the crick in our dong, pig snout, mer's ass, slaughterhouse cur, unchristened bro, screw thine own mother. So the Zaporozhians declare, you lowlife, you won't even be herding pigs for the Christians. Now we'll conclude, for we don't know the date and don't own a calendar. The moon's in the sky, the year with the Lord, the day's the same over here as it is over there. For this kiss our ass, Kashavai and Ivan Serko, with the whole Zaporozhian host. Whenever I read this I end up giggling uncontrollably. Honestly, if you're going to spend 80% of your letter listing off your titles, then you probably deserve this. According to the Talmud, the Egyptians sued the Jews for the stuff they stole just prior to the Exodus in the court of Alexander the Great. The Jews then countersued for 150 pluses of unpaid wages. The Egyptians asked for 3 days to put together a counter-argument. When the time came for them to present it, they just gave up and went home. If Larry David taught me anything, it's that you should always go for a Jewish lawyer, preferably a bald Jewish lawyer. When the Germans demanded the US military surrender during the Battle of the Bulge, the Americans responded by saying nuts. The Germans spent a lot longer than you'd think to try to figure out what they meant by that. This is perfect. I literally had a conversation with a German the other day and I said someone was nuts, he had no clue what I meant. The people of Pompeii who built their city right next to a mountain, believing Vesuvius would be regarded as an amazing sight for all of time. No you. When the Great Schism split the church into what are now the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, each of the leaders excommunicated the other. Maybe not the biggest one, but my most recent favorite is the story of CPT Swenson, Medal of Honor recipient. When the Taliban had ambushed his company and fixed their positions, a Tali called out, demanding the US to surrender. CPT Swenson at the time was treating the wounds of one of his men and in response, threw a grenade in the direction of the Tali as his answer. He then went with Dakota Mayer, Medal of Honor recipient, in an unarmored vehicle and rescued wounded Afghani and US soldiers in the kill zone. The Yom Kippur War, Egypt, Syria and various allies, totaling about 1 million troops, 3,000 tanks and 1,700 artillery units against Israel, clocking in at roughly 400,000 troops, 1,700 tanks and 900 artillery units. Guess who won? When Caesar returned from Gaul to have Crassus and Pompey threaten war and to destroy Caesar if he crossed the river into Rome, he crossed it and destroyed them both. Crassus was already dead in a separate battle even before Julius crossed the Rubicon with his legion. Honestly, the dude in Japan who survived both Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. He arrived home from work when the first bomb hit, everything destroyed. He went on a train to see if his family was safe in the other city. Got there like 5 minutes before the second bomb hit. John A. MacDonald, 3rd PM of Canada, absolute drunk, threw up while giving one of his speeches during a campaign because of how absolutely hammered he was, and recovered by yelling, and that's what I think of the opposition. Andrew Jackson beating the crap out of some guy who tried to assassinate him. The guy had 2 guns, which both somehow misfired, and Jackson took his cane and gave him a good licking. He got jacked, son. When Australia declared a war against emus and then lost, started another war with flightless freaking birds, then lost that only by the end of the second war, the emu population had more than tripled. I learned when taking Latin that they had no U. It was written as V. Spelling would be Jesus and strand of Jesus and FVCKEVO instead of frick you, no U. Actually it's no V. I'm happy to see another Latin speaker. When a German officer came to British paratroopers and circled in on him to discuss the surrender, the British replied that, unfortunately, they didn't have the facilities to take all the, significantly numerically superior, German forces prisoner. They then sarcastically apologized for the fact. Recently there was a British guy who really wanted to row the English Channel in a bathtub. The French created legislation to restrict him, so he went to the British Navy and got his tub declared an official vessel ship of the Navy. He was later given an official title. That time when the local fishing plant tried to get rid of starfish by chopping them into pieces and throwing them back in the ocean. They didn't know every piece would regenerate into a full starfish, and they ended up making the problem 100 times worse. Not historical, but I have to say Russia blaming the poisoning of that guy in London with a Russian nerve agent on Britain. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.